Welcome to Week in Review. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to serve you as a watchman on the wall. Have you been seeing and watching some of the footage of what's been happening in Hawaii, Maui, with the devastating wildfires? You know, 47 and a half years ago, my wife and I spent our honeymoon on Maui. And it's a pearl, it's a beautiful place, and now it's devastated. There's been about 120 people dead, over 1,000 people, they can't even find them. And if you see the pictures, do you think God is trying to get our attention? I believe today He's trying to help us see it's time for America to repent. Watch. It really is tragic what's happened in Hawaii with these wildfires. It's the worst disaster really in 100 years in Hawaii. And it's the second worst catastrophic disaster like this with wildfires in America's history. Now, have you ever looked at these kind of situations like this? Like they're warning right now and they're saying in the coming weeks, Hurricane Hilary. And this would be the first time for a tropical storm to come like this to California. And they're giving a red alert. They're saying, what's happening? This hasn't happened in over 80 years, this kind of activity. You know, if you look in the Bible in Genesis, you see where the imagination of men's hearts were only evil continually. There was violence and all kinds of perversion. And as a result of it, suddenly God brought a flood, even though He brought warnings. 8 people were rescued, but it happened. And God tells us in the scriptures, it says, he who hardens his heart, often having been reproved, will suddenly be cut off, and that without remedy. You know, God gives warnings, but suddenly something can happen, just like it hit Hawaii. If you study the decline and the fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon's classic, that came out when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And he gave warning signs and said there's contributing factors. There's a classic book that came out in the 1800s, and it was dealing with the last days of Pompeii. And if you Google Pompeii, you can see, I mean, this was a city that fell prey to all kinds of depravity and decline and wickedness. The brothels, the homosexuality, you can see the images carved. Thousands of people go there every single week and they walk through there. But are we paying attention when we see Noah and the flood, and then we see the fall of Rome? Billy Graham said 19 out of 21 civilizations that have fallen apart fell apart from within. And I believe God's trying to get our attention. Now, Cal Thomas is a conservative writer, and I respect him. He has his latest book out where he talks about being a watchman in the night, 50 years. And he says that when he's studied history, he sees basically certain contributing factors that signal the collapse of a civilization. Now, I'm a student of history, and I've studied. Let me put on the screen for you, and I want you to look at these. These are what I believe. These are mine in line with my studies and really historians. What would be 7 contributing factors to the fall of a country or a nation? Number 1, look at these. Number 1 is this: moral decline, depravity, and demonic activity. Number 2, breakdown of the family. Number 3, corruption in government and the press and media. Number 4, skyrocketing crime and violence. Number 6, weakened military. And then you go on, massive national debt. And here's the surprise: uncontrolled immigration and foreign invasion. Now let me just comment, are we paying attention? I could take each one of these and amplify, but just look at the skyrocketing debt and the problems in this country. Do you know that when you go to the food store, do you pay attention? Costco, you go to your Kroger, Safeway, wherever it is. Do you realize that those prices are the highest in 20 years in terms of how fast they're going up? I talked with a financial advisor the other day. This is a guy that in his office, he said, you know, Tiger Woods and other celebrities would come through. And he said, Larry, as a young couple, how can people afford a house anymore? And look at the interest rate, mortgage rates. What are they? 7.6%? This is shocking what's going on. And then you see consumer debt right now has, for the first time in America's history, passed 1 trillion. What does that mean? Well, that means the bills are going to come due, and people are going to look and say, wait a minute, you mean I'm going to have to pay 22% interest, and Folks, this is what it's about. New cars, have you checked? Oh, commercials on TV. People are popping around and getting in new cars in between the pizza commercials, you know. And you look what a new car is today. Do you realize it's right now $47,000 that's the average price for a new car. You say, well, look at the used ones. Well, what are you doing there? You're going close to what, 30 to 31,000. That's skyrocketing debt. And we have a man in the White House that just says, oh, you know, Bidenomics, everything is prospering. It's not. But you know, there is one other factor, and this is the one I want to zero in on today, and that is immigration. You see that as a contributing factor when immigration is out of control. Now, we have a man in the White House, and he is really breaking the law, our Constitution. And when he was inaugurated, he pledged, he took the oath of office that he would uphold the Constitution and he was going to protect the American people. Well, do you know that we have seen under his, over 2 years in office, over 7 million, that's not thousand, that's million illegal immigrants come into this country. When Donald Trump was president, do you know this? That there was a back to Mexico, return to Mexico policy. Soon as Mr. Biden came in office, goodbye, that went down the tubes. And now, what about the terror watch list? Have you paid attention to that? Do you know that under Mr. Trump in 4 years, there were 14 people caught on the terrorist watch list? Do you know how many have been caught under Mr. Biden in just 2 years? 114 caught on the terrorist watch list. And you know what? Immigration authorities, they say, well, there's probably another 400 or 500 that have slipped through that haven't been caught. We are in a dangerous place. And you need to have a biblical worldview. I know I've spoken with people and they'll say, well, you know, as Christians, we're to be welcoming the migrants and look at the Statue of Liberty. And there's all kinds of misconceptions and myths. We have laws, but our president is not upholding them. We have an open border. And one of the contributing factors to the collapse of a nation is when immigration is out of control. We've got to pray. And I want you to watch this bullseye video because it'll educate you so you can speak as an informed influencer when this comes up. Pray for America, and may we elect righteous people that are going to uphold our immigration laws. This is critical. It's been dangerous, and it's been only getting worse. Watch. Let's look at 3 steps to solve immigration the Jesus way. You know, my father was an immigrant. He came here from Poland as a child. We lived in really poverty with no car, no vacations. My dad worked as a janitor. My disabled mother scrubbed floors on her knees 3 days a week. I start here because I have real compassion for immigrants and I support immigration, legal immigration. Many well-intentioned, but I believe misdirected individuals, and I respectfully include here presidents and presidential candidates, influential politicians, and even news commentators, they seem to believe the compassionate solution to the escalating border crisis is just extend our arms and declare, y'all come in. Guilt is projected on any of us who sincerely disagree and dare to say, you're missing it. You're not handling this the way Jesus would. So who's right? Well, let's take a look at this. Over 4 decades ago, I worked at the AFL-CIO headquarters, right across the street from the White House in D.C. My job was in the Community Relations Department, helping union members and families with humanitarian needs outside of the contract of a union. Early on, I discovered there are requirements and limitations to assistance that's being offered. You know, in Matthew 22, Jesus told a parable of a man desiring entrance to an event, but he was refused entrance because he didn't honor the requirements. In Matthew 25, Jesus told of 10 young maidens desiring to gain entrance to a special occasion, and yet 5 were turned away, called fools. Why? Because they didn't fulfill the requirements. Let me give you 3 steps to solve the crisis. Number 1, we need to extend genuine love to all immigrants. You look in the Old Testament, immigrants were to be granted acceptance. You'll see in the chapter, the verses here. They were given opportunities to collect food, and they were to be treated justly. This wasn't just some blanket entitlement because God required the immigrants to keep the laws of the land just like the native people. Number 2, respect realistic limitations. If a lifeboat has a sign that says limit of 12, it can appear compassionate and say, well, let's put 25 in, but the result will be the drowning of everyone. Today, America faces $19 trillion in debt.
Cities are going bankrupt or on the precipice of insolvency. The welfare system is exploding. We're stretched to the max in our emergency rooms, schools, healthcare, and social service agencies. We need limits. Number 3, obey the government and its laws. It's unmistakable that the divine directive is for citizens obey governing authorities. You'll see the verses. The one exception is if government forces us to violate a law of God. Now be honest, what is your reaction when you've stood in line for 20, 30 minutes for a ticket, maybe a restaurant seat, and someone just barges in and says, give me it. You'd say, hey, wait, excuse me, you need to wait in line like the rest of us. We must, I say it again, build up and extend the long overdue border fences. Yes, walls and fences do work. Why else do we have them around the White House? How about Israel, China? They've relied on them for decades, centuries. The Wall of China is 13,000 miles long, was built centuries before Jesus. It worked for them. When elitists who live in their gated communities tell us fences don't work, I ask them, well then, why do you have them? Let me say this, when the bathtub's overflowing, the first thing you do is turn off the water. You don't debate whether to use a rag or a mop. The number one priority is shut off the water. This is a pivotal time, and it's a defining moment in our history. We need a unified response here in America.
Hey friends, if you felt this video was helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified once new videos become available. Thanks.